Welcome to everyone that will be tuning in the next couple of minutes to listen to this week's live episode of the Ping Pong Show. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the strategic direction, or what we think should be considered to be the strategic direction of Table Tennis England, by an expert panel of people that have all sorts of experience with Table Tennis England. So Tony, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tony Catt. I've got 40 years experience of playing at various pretty low levels. I have recently, I've been a national councillor for the last 10 years, chaired national council for 2 of them, onto the board of TTE via an election last year, and have been on the board for the year.
Excellent. And just to expand on that, what's the sort of key accountabilities of your role?
The key accountabilities of my role are simply that it is a unitary board, and we share all of the decisions that are made within the board. I also am on the finance committee part of the board. I probably, for the fact that I work in financial services compliance, would probably be more suited to the governance side of that, but since I work in financial services, I'm on the finance side at the moment. I shall probably be looking at things like the risk registers with Joe over time to help them with that, because again, that's what I do for a living.
I'm Matthew Porter. I'm currently head coach at Bishopaughton Table Tennis Club. We're a registered charity and deliver to about 400 people a week, or we were before lockdown. I'm also a former employee at ETTA, as it was, in the events department. I've now been involved for about 20 years within the sport. It's hard to tell, but yeah.
And Colin?
Hi, Colin Wilson. These days I run Corby Smash Table Tennis Centre with Henry Arthur, and in the past I've been a board member of Table Tennis England, like Tony is now, and then previous to that I was lucky enough to play for England and coach England teams, and I've coached and trained coaches and development officers abroad. And then a fair while ago, 1992 to 95, I was a full-time table tennis development officer for Greater London for Table Tennis England.
Excellent. Yeah, so
that's before you were born, isn't it, Liam?
Yeah, potentially, but probably not. So tonight we're joined by, as you just heard, a very experienced panel, and I'd like to sort of treat this as a type of think tank where we can sort of debate and discuss ideas that potentially could be incorporated and by key decision makers and move forward potentially. Everything we say is complete opinion, and I would invite everyone that's watching to comment away this valuable opportunity and ask any questions you may have about Table Tennis England, about what they're currently doing, or any questions that you'd like us to discuss. But without further ado, the first question, so Jason Sugru, who couldn't join us tonight, sent me a couple of questions to address. And the first one is the tournament structure in the UK fit for purpose? So, and how could it be improved moving forward? Does anyone want to volunteer to share their...
I'll have a little go with that. Personally, I think that there are quite a lot of tournaments to actually play with the Grand Prix and also the local events, the 1 stars and 2 stars that are available to people. I think the calendar could be better planned so that there are not so many clashes of things. I think that all too often, like last season, I was at a board meeting in February where they did it for the national championships on the Friday, and then I had a county game on the Saturday. So I then ended up not going to the national championships because of the clash.
I know there's lots of problems in the junior calendar with that as well, and training camps and sorts.
So those things, but also within the tournaments, I think in order to get people good value for money, I would like to see more banded events, or possibly even more banded towards age events. So you would have, say, an under 21 and an under 25 and an under 30 almost. So you'd actually encourage people to continue to play. And I think those banded events, either by age or by quality, would mean that more people would continue to play throughout their adult life, but also they'd probably get better value for money because they would have more matches of their own standard to play on a tournament day.
Actually, Tony, on this sort of assessment of whether tournaments in the UK are sort of fit for purpose, I guess, is that being looked at, or is anything being done internally by Table Tennis England currently?
Well, there is currently a competitions review being undertaken by Neil Rudd, which is to take into, we've already had a bit of a British League review. There's a competitions review on the go, and there's an awful lot to look at, because I think these things can't be considered in silos. So you have to be looking at the calendar, you have to be looking at the different age groups. Also, when I've put things up on Facebook where I've said, run a vets and a cadets tournament at the same time, I was shot down because I had not factored in the fact that there's umpires for both of those events and there aren't enough to go around. So there's lots of different things that need to be brought together. They can't all be done in silos. They need to be very much integrated, otherwise it's not going to work, and it just will. I think there's a lot of events run, and there's something for everybody. There's 1 stars, there's 2 stars, and all over the place, which is great. So there are a lot of events run, but it's a question of whether people feel they're getting value for money from those.
Can I just want to come in there and sort of, although there is, sort of agree with what a lot of Tony says, is there is an awful lot of 1-star, 2-star tournaments, but geographically spread, there's not. Value for money, there's not. The star structure currently isn't fit for purpose. The difference between a 2-star and a 3-star is production of according to the Table Tennis England guidelines of running the tournament, is a slightly higher qualified referee in producing a programme. So to do that, the players have to pay more for the tournament to run, but yet actually in terms of ranking points, it makes no difference. So from a club's point of view, there's no incentive. So in terms of, and sorry to go back on my progressive structure sort of banging on,
No.
but there isn't any progression. Going back to what Tony said in terms of the banded, again, brilliant. Even the age groups, actually that's offering these people some sort of progression. More matches of a similar ability or people of a similar age. But for me, you see an awful lot of juniors, certainly up in the northeast, is we've got to do 2 hours travelling to go to a 1-star or a 2-star in either Blackpool or Grantham. They're brilliant events, but if the kids aren't got the tournament experience, they get battered on the first time. Some of them don't have plate events, so there's no incentive for that kid to keep going. You've got to be at a certain level already to go to that tournament, but then actually, from a coaching hat on, offering that competitive ability and that competitive learning, that's how kids learn. Well, certainly the boys, obviously slightly different for females, but they're not getting that incentive.
So what would be your main recommendations going forward if you could sort of guide that thinking?
Ideal world?
Or
ideal world, you would have going back to sort of a regional structure. I don't like the idea of the regional structure in the modern game, but if you had your regional structure that each region had 5 1-star events, 4 2-star events, 2 3-star events, and 1 4-star event. So every child, in theory, has the same opportunity to get to the same level. Obviously, you're going to have regions that are just generally stronger, but actually everybody's getting the same chance without going back to the financial question, which I know is something that's going to pop up later on, is, people aren't disadvantaged based on their geographic, never mind their family income, just purely from a geographical point of view. And it then ties into, again, to me, for ranking system, you've got little Johnny, who, you know, I know there's plenty down in Brighton, Sussex, Horsham Way that can play a 2-star every weekend, pick up 10, 15, 20, whatever points it is every weekend, and moves up that ranking list, whereas you've got players that are potentially better that don't get that opportunity.
Yeah. Has that always been the case, or has it got progressively worse or better since you were an events officer?
With my hat on, we only looked at my responsibility was the Grand Prix national championships as opposed to the 1-star, 2-star local sort of locally organised events, and that's, as far as I'm aware, that's still the case. So all those events are run by individuals and clubs. The increase in tournament has been tournaments run has been massively increased. Clubs caught on to the fact that they can be quite nice little money makers without overworked. Do you know what I mean? You can make a few £100 per event without overcharging anybody. So there's been a massive increase in the number of events. But for me, what I'd like to have seen was some sort of restriction on quality of these events. So we run a 2-star that's the same equivalent of a 4-star. Everything matches. We've got an international referee, but no point running it as a 4-star because of the cost. But equally, there's 2-stars that have got mismatched equipment that's not as well organised. But there's no standardisation, I feel, and there's no progression.
And lastly, Colin, as a founder of Corby Smash as well, I'd like very interested to hear your opinion on this.
Okay, well, we love putting events on, just open events and Super League and they were great events. I think as far as the future of table tennis is concerned, from a Table Tennis England point of view, we've got to think about not being too insular. If we've got 28,000 members now, how many of those play tournaments of the fashion that Jason's talking about? I know Jason well. And he makes a good point. I can imagine what's behind his question. And I think there are improvements that could be made. But we've got to be careful. If we're talking about 2,500 people that do the tournament circuit, let's not get too obsessed with focusing all of Table Tennis England's energy on those 2,500 people. What we need to do is to stop the fact that we used to have 100,000 people, members of Table Tennis England. Now we've got 28,000. And are we going to spend all our time focusing on 2,000 to 2,500 people? They're important, yes. The most important thing about the tournament circuit is to rebuild the base of the pyramid. That way, if we can get it up to 5,000 to 6,000 people that are playing tournaments, and I'm not just talking about getting people who are standard adult league players playing tournaments. I'm talking about getting all the kids playing, all the kids that Matt's talking about, that he's bringing along, hundreds a week. Draycott, look at what they're doing there, many other places. And we need to get youngsters and older newcomers, middle-aged men, middle-aged women, playing competition as much as possible. To do that, I would let it go ahead with a minimum standard of structure. So you wouldn't have umpires in blazers and big expenses for the clubs to play. I would base them out of the clubs and not at leisure centres. That takes money out of the sport. If we're paying for expensive external venues, we're taking money out of the sport. Yes, we need to do that sometimes for prestigious events, but that's not the 2,000 to 2,500. That's just the top few. That's okay. But at the base level, put the money into Matt's club, put the money into BATS. And then what I would do, as Matt says, is regionalise it. I would organise the calendar so that when you've got the nationals on, you've got the nationals on. When you've got a Grand Prix on, you don't have a 1-star or 2-star 20, 30 miles away, clashing with it. You organise it so that if you're running lower level events, you're running one lower level event and you allocate that date per county. At the next level up, you would allocate that everyone's running a 2-star, let's say, at a regional level. So you don't have to travel all the way across the country, but you're starting to create a wider base of pyramid, and you're starting to build that progression that Matt is talking about up through the system, through the levels. And what we really need to do is double the number of people playing. And although we don't have hardly any spectators, we need to think about creating events that are spectator friendly, spectator attractive. We've got to start somewhere, and we've got to rebuild what we've lost over 40 years, which is spectators. We used to have them. We don't now. and I would make those events spectator friendly. In doing that, you actually make it a much better experience for all the players as well. The other thing that I'd say is, in terms of ranking lists, my radical version is you just have one ranking list: old, young, black, white, boy, girl, one single ranking list, and it is just on standard. Okay, we've got all sorts of anomalies about what about the number 2 cadet girl beats the number 5 cadet girl, or that they're ranked differently because they beat a veteran man. You know, I'm really looking at let's just categorize everybody in the country according to their standard and have them playing against each other all over the place. Yes, you can have your junior events. Yes, you can have your veterans events, but let's have one ranking list just to cope with standard alone. And then finally, I would have not only the normal events that we talk about, but additional events as well. If you go to a swimming competition, you get a medal for winning for swimming down the pool from one end to the other. In the next event, someone swims down the pool and swims back up the other end of the pool, and they get a medal. Then someone jumps in, dives down the other end, turns over on their back, comes back, goes forwards on their front again, and they get another medal for that. Another event, they jump in, swim down to the other end, get to the other end, someone else takes over. They get another medal for that. No wonder swimming gets so much money for their elite performance. There's so many medals available in the Olympics. We've got hardly any, and we may not change that. But the principle is, rather than talking about should we get rid of this form of table tennis and have sandpaper or hardbat or whatever, embrace them all and put them together. We should have enjoyable formats of table tennis, some of them innovative, some of them involving bats. You might play with a higher net, 7-inch net, and you can have different events, lots of fun. And I think the Viva la Difference, I think it will add to the flavour and increase the number of people around tournaments. I don't think it necessarily answers everything that Jason's talked about, but that's my innovative start.
That's a very, very comprehensive answer, which is certainly a lot of value add, and bits of that, if not all, would probably be agreed on by a lot of people watching. And in fact, I know that Martin Gunn has commented and essentially agreed with especially the regional point that almost everyone's made around having those 1-stars and 2-stars more regionally, because then it also doesn't limit players to their sort of social economic status. So it is very, very inclusive.
Much better for that.
Yeah, and if you can help support those clubs in the regions at the same time, then that's even better, and it's creating that sort of virtuous cycle. I think just to shine sort of light on sort of my opinion on this, in terms of, so I'm just going to focus on a couple of examples as opposed to the huge structure in general. In terms of Grand Prix, I think there's been some criticism around banded events being great, but Sunday, you play the men's open, you might go out in the first or second round, and then there's only really an under-21s event. There's a doubles, but it means that there's a lack of incentive to go to the Grand Prix and just to play the Saturday and then probably go out in the first or second round of the men's. And I think that could be looked at and assessed, and in my opinion, on the Sunday, potentially bring back those banded events so that it's more inclusive and people do get value for money, for spending a lot of money going there and having the hotels and etc. Also, I think the Grand Prix should be weighted like a 4-star. And in terms of the regulation around a 4-star has to have a certain amount of umpires, I think that needs to be addressed. And in fact, I think Grand Prix should certainly be the status of a 4-star so that you can gain a lot more than you can sort of lose. Because in the junior circuit, that's one reason why 4-stars are so popular, because you can gain a lot more. Local leagues. So Colin, I was just going to ask your point on the sort of standardized ranking. I know a few years ago, I think Steve Pound proposed that everyone should have a ranking, including local league players. Do you think that is that what you were talking about in terms of having standardized?
Why not? It's technically much easier than it used to be to do that. So why not? I'm not saying that's the only ranking list you'd have.
No.
But why not have that? Yeah. You can argue that someone playing in Sussex is actually not as good as someone playing in Bishop Auckland. But really, does that matter? Let's just all pile in and enjoy it and progress as we wish to.
Exactly. And
The single ranking list has the advantage of everybody pretty much knowing where they are, and then if you need your cadet girls or your cadet boys, you just do that as a subset of the single rank. So it's just filtering down as necessary, but having the single list makes perfect sense.
Yeah, 100%.
It does. I think it's just it's almost the equality of the balance of people playing opportunities. So we've obviously had Rory on the show, and Rory, we sort of play 8 leagues. So if he's playing a league match 5 nights a week, whereas you've then got somebody that can only access one local league, they are clearly going to be higher, but there's no equality. So if you do play a competition, a Grand Prix, for instance, then actually your standards are completely out.
Depends on your algorithm.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a consideration. I was around when they changed it from having from the single list that did, as Tony said, and everybody filtered out to the individual lists, and I certainly benefited from having the one list. You know, there were certain loopholes in the system that were available, and people took advantage of it. As I say, it's just that equality consideration for me.
I 100% agree that they're probably going forward. There is a huge base of players in the UK that aren't being, I guess, it's monetized, if you want to, use it in the business sense. And the recommendations I'd probably have for that is integrating and providing that progression, like people have suggested, of going from local league to spring tournaments. And I think one lever that you can do that is by making better tournaments like Grand Prix weighted higher, so you can gain more. And also, as I've said many times on this show, I'm a massive advocate of a gain-only list or a huge limit on the amount of points you can lose, so that people aren't disincentivized to going and spending all that money and all the effort and a weekend and time only to come back with a loss of net points. There's a huge amount that could be, and I think that should be a strategic focus in terms of monetizing the huge base that we have in the sport. And then lastly, the point on making it a spectacle that Colin alluded to, one part of that I think table testing has worked on but should continue to focus on is things like we're doing now, live streaming and getting as much exposure over the internet and video as possible of the game. Because the amount of people still now that watch table tennis for the first time and say, what? I didn't realise that was what it was like. And if you can increase the awareness in any capacity, it can only be good. And the one thing I just wanted to touch on and ask for your opinion is, do you think there should be, and why isn't there, a senior masters where the top 10 in England, men and women, come into the UK and play against each other to have a extremely high quality tournament, and it means that they're not criticised for just coming back for nationals once a year? Does anyone want to? Yeah, go on.
For me, it would obviously have to be financially worth it for the players involved. If they are giving up, we're talking about calendar clashes, and obviously the ITTF calendar is getting just as busy now with the amount of international events. Is if they've got to give up the opportunity to go and play a Pro Tour event or play a club match, obviously France play on a Tuesday night, you then got Bundesliga that play on a weekend, they are potentially giving up a lot more fee than what they would get by coming back and playing the top 10. I think to then sort of, people talk about putting it in as a necessity to play for England. Yeah. You've got to play that event. But then actually, as Liam and Paul have spoke about, their sponsors pay for them to go and play Pro Tours, some of the events. So actually, I can go out and if I go second or third round, I'm probably still going to get more. So for me, it would have to be worth the top guys financially. But if you put on, obviously we've now got the Mark Bates sponsorship with the national championships. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but if that was sort of, say, expanded and actually they could put a chunk of budget behind that, then I'd be for that 100%. But again, for me, it's bigger picture over smaller picture. Do we want them coming back and playing in England once a year, or do we want them competing on a worldwide scale? I haven't really got an answer for that, but that's just my thoughts on it, really.
I quite like the idea of a top 10 masters, but I would want to be probably a little bit more ambitious than that, from the point of view that I really feel that we should try to make the top division of the British League worth them coming back to play. because at the moment it makes a mockery of our British League that none of our top players play in it. And, to me, that would be the whole point of actually having the league in place at all, that it's something for our next ones down, get the chance to play against the top 10 because they're all in it. And so I think that we need to be more ambitious about the quality of our top division in the Senior British League than we actually are at the moment. And that would also give them the opportunity to play each other. It would also give a lot of upwardly mobile people the opportunity to play against them, which currently they don't do. And if they just jet into the country for a top 10 and all go their separate ways again, nobody else has played them. And it's more of the same, really. And I think it would be better opportunity progression-wise for the next 10, 15, 20 players to actually have the opportunity to play against that quality on a regular basis.
And potentially more players in terms of the standard. If you've got the top guys playing, then perhaps more foreigners will come over as well and increase that strength even more.
But I think that also comes back to the way we try to get sponsorship within table tennis England. Great, we've got Mark Bates doing the national championships. It's fantastic. But we don't have any sponsors for any Grand Prix events, any British League events or anything. And I would be much more keen, for example, for the Grand Prix to have a local sponsor. So if you're down in Bournemouth, you try and get Vitality Life to sponsor the event down there. Or even, and I know this makes me a bit of a heretic, even either gambling companies or breweries, so local breweries, certainly for the Vets events. Why wouldn't we have Harvey's Brewery sponsoring an event in Sussex? They'd love it. They'd be, on you go, mate. Do you want to wear all our shirts for the day? And it'd be a major thing. And I think that we need to work much harder rather than relying on one sponsor. We need to have various people sponsoring little parts of the operation, in which case if we lose one of those sponsors, it's not a total disaster. Whereas if we lose the one sponsor we have, it's a total train crash. So I think if we get lots more sponsors in, it would also mean there would be more money within table tennis in England that may enable us to afford to bring the top players back to play in the British League. And that's all about getting proper sponsorship from high quality companies on a regional basis or even national. It's a sport. It's currently people want to be healthier. Surely there's going to be some companies that want to get in on the back of our health kick to actually put money into a sport, and hopefully a growing sport.
Yeah, of course. And Colin, Martin Guns actually just said 30 years ago, Save and Co. and many other European players played the National League here in England. Colin will know that. I didn't know that. So.
I do know that. So let's start with the top 10 question and build out from there. Yeah. 1984, I was 21 years old. I played in the England men's top 12.
Okay.
I was ranked 10, thought I could get 7th, trained for it in a particular way. It didn't work. I finished 11th out of 12. And after being mentally tough, and having a really bad time, at the end of it, I went to the back of the bleachers, put a towel over my head at 21 years of age, and cried my heart out, having given it everything for 2 solid days and got not much. I only won 2. I was gutted. So thanks for the memory. So in principle, I think it's a fabulous event. I think these days, relative to 30 years ago, as Martin's talking about, we've got a problem. In between the time that I was working for Tennis England, ETTS was, in London, running around trying to make table tennis happen for 3 years, fabulous years, and loads of great people, Len Pinfold, and tons of others that were doing fantastic work. In that generation, between that time and me starting Corby Smash, the part that was the most difficult was that in that, how long, 20 year, 25-year period, the profile of table tennis has gone down and down and down. We've lost working men's canteens, as they used to be called. League play generally has gone down and down. Number of reasons for that, number of competitors to table tennis for that. Some things we've shot ourselves in the foot over this period. It's been going on since the 50s and 60s. It's been declining over that period. When I used to do table tennis exhibitions in schools when I was in my 20s, just trying to earn a few bob and helping out the Table Tennis England staff at that time, they go to a table tennis exhibition in the primary school. Who's played table tennis? Nearly all the kids go, yeah, I played on my dining room table or on holiday, whatever. Who knows how to hold a bat? Yeah, I'll show you how to hold a bat. And they might or might not. Doing it now, we've lost a lot of profile. Not all the hands go up. Lots of hands don't go up. So when you say, come to our table tennis club and have a game of table tennis, they don't think, shall I have a game of table tennis at the table tennis club? They go, what the heck are you talking about? What's table tennis? So we've lost that real base level of root public awareness about what the sport is to a significant degree, and we've got to build that up. So coming back to the question, a top 10 now or a top 12 as used to be, great idea, but is it commercial? There was someone then that wanted to sponsor it, and it was commercial. There are enough people that are interested in it, made it worthwhile for the sponsor. These days, would it be worthwhile for a sponsor? Secondly, table tennis has got more and more fractured and individual. People are out playing for themselves. When they're out, they go home. They don't want to umpire. They're not playing in a team in many environments. They don't stay to watch. And I think we've lost something there as well in terms of that camaraderie, that community, and that interest in each other. It happens online. It happens to a degree with friends, but not to the same number of tens and tens of thousands of people that it used to. And that individualization of the sport means that it's hard to run a top 10, because the number 10, 9, 8, 7, and 6 would say, this is a fantastic idea, bring it on. The numbers 4, 3, 2, and 1 are saying, oh, we're doing something more important somewhere else. I'm playing for my club in Germany. I'm playing for playing table tennis, playing for England in an event in the Olympics or something. And if they're not, they're resting or training. So it's harder to put on than it used to be, because you won't necessarily get the players, and also it's not as attractive to a sponsor as it was back in the 90s or even the 80s. So that makes it a little bit difficult. I would support what Matt and Tony are saying, is if we're going to make it commercial again, we've got to run it through the clubs. You're much more likely to get a club sponsor than you are to get a sponsor for a 1-star or a 2-star. There's loads of them. There's loads of other sports. What is it in there for a sponsor? We can all sit online and say we need lots of sponsors. That's the answer to everything. Well, how do we get them? We get them by producing something that provides a return on investment for it. And that is difficult. And with a lower profile than we had a generation ago, it's even more difficult. But you do see it, and I see it significantly through the European club network, where they're the ones that are able to get the sponsors, and you've got a community spirit, and you've got a local tribalism, and you've got local support. So you've got spectators, and you've got players playing in a team and supporting each other, caring about each other, training with each other. And then you have a certain number of individual events on top of that. So again, I'd push it back into the clubs and think very, very carefully commercially.
I mean, I think that ties beautifully in with what last time I was on with that structure. You know, it's in terms of you can invest in the clubs and invest in that community and get that camaraderie. You get that players develop together. You get it's just, to me, an absolute no-brainer that if the investment's in the club, you'll get the commercial aspect and it can grow from there. Water the seed.
As a devil's advocate, wasn't that the objective of British League Premier, having the home and aways, trying to liberate the clubs and give them power and attract spectators?
Has it worked?
I mean, no. I mean, in my opinion, probably not. However, yeah, so it's probably something that should be reviewed. But do you think it's a step in the right direction?
For me personally, I think yes. However, I think it's been done the wrong way around. You know, I use the Premier League as an example. That broke away, but the structure was already there to support that breakaway. Whereas what we've done is we've taken a piece and go, oh, well, we'll do that. But actually, if there'd have been a little bit, for me, rather than investing in that top end for so few players, the investment. I mean, I don't know if there was any investment in terms of what Table Tennis England or British
There
League
was.
cost. There was. Excellent. Then actually, would that have been better suited investing in terms of the bottom rungs?
No.
Yeah,
No.
maybe not a good example, but for me, the money was spent on so few, and you've then got a lot of players that were coming in overseas from a fair few. But
It's a balance. My opinion now, I'm just reacting to what Matt is saying. The first year of what was called National League, now British League, was 1979-1980. I was in it. I played for Ellenborough with Graham Sandley, Dave Tan, Mark Mitchell, Leon Smith, Nigel Tyler, John Kitchener. Fantastic days. We played Sea-Link Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes was sponsored by Sea-Link. How far away from the sea have you got to be to get sponsored by Sea-Link? But they had a reason for it, and they got sponsorship for it. Soham, with Paul Day's team, we were getting 250 a match. They were getting more. They were getting everybody from the town out, 300 plus people a match as spectators first year. And the British League started to work. Great credit to Alan Ransom for pushing it. I know there's this balance with county matches and what have you, but he saw the club vision, created that. I was in the Prem from the start. It was the only division there was. And there was some money for the top. You can imagine it wasn't much, but clubs were getting sponsors nationally. There was a bit of sponsorship. And so the top 3 clubs were able to make a bit of money and pay some players. As the idea took root, players lower down went, we want some of this. And so we created a pyramid, which is not wrong, but by doing it on the same dates and by sharing the prize money down the pyramid, you lost A, the spectators, and B, the commerciality, and now you've got Liam and Paul that don't play in this country.
Yeah,
and there's a direct connection between the two. And while we need money everywhere, I would say until you actually focus on that section, like we had before, and reinvent that and refocus on that, it's not a lot of money that you're losing anywhere further down. But you don't lose all your spectators by just saying, "Oh, let's all have a go at this." That's democratic to the point of nihilism. You know, we were trying to create a special event, and bad mistakes were made, and we need to recreate that top division of British League with the commerciality, with the prize money, and if people are ranked 70, 80, 300 in the country, and they're playing in their league and they win the division, they don't get money, they get promotion. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. But that's the way it is anyway at the minute. But what I was saying in terms of the current British League is people don't have the connection to it. There's no, to me, it's just a case of, we've got clubs around that there's very few British players that are playing in it, and there's no,
Totally. Totally
Liam,
agree.
Yeah. So in terms of what you're saying,
totally agree. You shouldn't be allowed. You shouldn't be allowed to play in the. Yeah, where I'm with you, Matt. You shouldn't be allowed in the British League unless you're a proper club.
Yes. Which,
funny
enough, we were discussing
three
something.
people who are mates from different part of the country is not a club. And the national British League should be a club league. And a club is something that has got 4 or more tables. It's open 3 or more days of the week. It's got a good female representation. It's got 2 coaches. It's got a junior section. It's got a team in junior, senior, and veterans British League. That's a club. If you're not one of those, Table Tennis England shouldn't be spending its money and resources on building you, because we need to build clubs, not just spend loads of resources allowing 2 or 3 people to get together and just play a game. I love those people. I know them. I want them to be able to play, and there are plenty of opportunities to do so. And you can have lower level divisions, but we need to recreate this Premier division that is genuine. And maybe now, we've got more clubs than 8, more good clubs than 8. If we look at what Tony does, what Matt does, what a number of other people watching have got, and we need to get all of those clubs in the top, sort of Premier and North, First Division North, First Division South.
Sorry, Colin, what about
and make that and promote that top end?
Well, what about the players that don't live near a club, or the club near them is of players that wouldn't play to the standard that player would want to? As in, would players from one end of the country still be allowed to sign for one of these clubs if it wasn't their local club?
Because of that problem, I think you can't put a restriction on who plays. So I wouldn't say you've got to live in a geographical area.
So
I understand that problem. I think, yes, you can sign a player, but you've got to demonstrate that you're a Premier club. And Premier clubs being diluted and diluted. Yeah. And we need to get back to respecting and supporting and building more large, proper clubs that support table tennis across all of the demographics of the local communities.
Well, 100%. And I think it's a good time. So someone's commented, Jamie Martin, it's like he'd read in my mind. And he's said, where would the funding come from? And where is most of the Table Tennis England revenue going currently? So my question onto that, first of all, Table Tennis England Annual Report 2019-20, just been published. I recommend everyone go on the website and look at it because it's got an excellent breakdown. And it's probably not communicated across as better as it could be, given that so many people have so many questions still about funding. But my question is funding correctly allocated? Could it be allocated better? And the example I'm going to give is that now the National Junior Programme requires a fairly significant investment to be part of the team, which some would say limits those national junior players to come from a certain socio-economic background. So therefore, in terms of funding, where does it go? Could it be allocated better? And we can touch on other points like accountability being one as potentially a root of the problem. But Tony, as someone that's within the structure currently, can you shed your great wisdom on that subject?
Right. Well, I think the main problem with the funding for Table Tennis England is that 75% of it comes from Sport England, and they are given quite stringent guidelines as to how that money can be spent, in which case there isn't an awful lot left over to do anything that would be discretionary spending. So it then means their hands are tied in that way. On a practical basis, I personally think that there is far too much onus right at the top end, where a lot of money is spent really running around, probably after the top 4 players at the expense of the next 12, 15. And I think that that could probably be better spent, but I may well get shot down in flames because we might be being told that's how that money needs to be spent on those performance players who are going to bring glory to our country at some point. So from that point of view, that's where I think the problem lies. I don't like the thought of people needing to pay to be part of the development schemes, and certainly within the finance committee I see people that are paying by instalment to do that, and I found that very difficult to reconcile.
That's me with Sam.
And so from that point of view, you know, I think if the members were asked, do you think that people should be paying to be on those development things, they would probably say no. And then if TTE were to turn around and say, oh, by the way, would you pay an extra £5 on your membership fee to pay for that? The answer would probably also be no, because they'd say, what do we get out of that? And there's this whole single point of view of, you know, I pay my membership fee begrudgingly, and what does TTE do for us? And in actual fact, if you look at what is available within the structure of TTE, they do a hell of a lot with not a lot of money. But I think that if the membership were asked, they would want the development teams to be paid for. They would also want to see women's teams sent to all the events, which they're not currently. But those things cost money. And I personally would prefer to be able to show exactly what that will cost and say to the members, this is what it's going to cost. Give us another £5.
So Tony, where is that money? So if the money's not going to funding the junior development team, where is the money going, and what are the stringent conditions on Sport England money?
Well, the money currently, I think far too much of it is spent really chasing around the top
Okay,
four
right,
people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get shared around well enough. I'm not aware of the stringent rules behind that money being put in, so I'm afraid I can't comment on that with
I
any
know
great.
I know that one is participation. I know they've got quite an aggressive target for that. And actually, the annual report, again, I would refer everyone to because it has very good breakdown.
Yeah.
But I mean, Colin, as someone with a child that was part of the setup or is still part of the setup, and having been a paying parent, what's your opinion on the funding and junior squad question?
Hey, well, I'm sounding like the old man that used to do a bit of ping pong in his younger days, and it was true. When I was a junior, I played for England juniors over 100 times, from the ages of 13 to 17, as it was then. I played in 5 consecutive European Youth Championships. I never paid any expense, or my parents never paid any expenses or flights or anything. When I was on England duty, if you're on England duty, it was paid for. And again, in a generation, that's completely gone. I've got Sam that's been playing for England juniors and now, doing well in the under-21s. He's living abroad, training abroad. Yes, he's got some things, from table tennis England. Yeah, great, but it is very expensive. And you can easily go through over £1,000 a month out of your net pay, which doesn't really leave a family with anything. Just to stay on the radar, and so it's got more expensive. There's less available. Sport England money has got targeted at different things. The Sport England money doesn't cover that anymore. Tony's absolutely right. The membership would say, this is really bad, until they're asked to pay for it, and then they wouldn't want to. I completely understand that, but it's a difficult situation. And again, we've lost profile, we've lost numbers, we've lost income relatively to where we were a generation ago. So it's hard, it's painful, it's expensive. I think compared to Des Douglas famously didn't have a great deal of backing, but he managed to make it to 5-7 in the world, and had a fabulous career, my hero, and did it on a shoestring. I don't know that that's even possible now. So we're in a tricky situation, just to answer your point about being a parent of a aspiring young player, it's hard.
And Matt,
I've forgotten the question.
The question was, the question to Tony was, especially focused on where the funding is allocated. But to you, from an outside point of view, do you think it could be sort of allocated more efficiently going forward? And I guess I know you've got a point to make about accountability, and likewise, what's the solution to this funding sort of situation?
For me, I think Colin and Tony have hit it on the head, is the fact that the funding isn't there. There isn't a funding stream coming in to cover that development aspect. But, and again, I know even from my days that the money, going back to sort of 9-10 years ago, the money was very specifically budgeted from Sport England into particular pots and pies and things. But for me, I know there's an awful lot of money spent on participation projects such as Ping. But for me, as a member paying mid-range player, why is that participation? I'd much rather see some of that money invested in, as we keep referring to, into clubs. If clubs are being built to sustain all aspects of that community and being made to be welcoming, to being made to offer all these different facets and different opportunities, then actually why doesn't some of the Ping stuff fall under their responsibility?
The problem with the Ping money is that it is actually from a specific pot for Ping, and so it can't be redirected the way we would want it to be.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But from a sport, if we were to put something more towards Sport England in a more long-term vision, is why is the governing body going out into individual towns and locations that very often have clubs that actually could take over some of that responsibility? For me, if there was investment in something tangible, obviously Colin's got had the facility down in Corby there that was brilliant. It was something that the community could see, community to go and actually go into. And did you have some ping tables, Colin? Do I remember that right?
Yeah, it took us a while, but yeah, and we got some outdoor tables locally in 2 different places. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's something we've been
actually,
campaigning for.
The ping tables are quite interesting because in Brighton there's quite a lot of ping tables all around the town, but Brighton City Table Tennis Club basically says they're theirs, and they go along and they run sessions on them. They go and do all sorts of fantastic stuff. So they may as well be theirs, but there's such an active club that they're actually getting something from it. And that's where I think we lose a lot of tricks with ping and the ping pong parlours, where they're set up without a local club to pick up the participating people from there and take them to somewhere where they can be monetised within the Table Tennis England family, and actually take some progress for them to move into a club from participating on a ping table.
So for me, 100% is why is the money being invested from Sport England in such a short-term aspect? Well, actually, I'm trying to think of a town that doesn't have a club right now. I really can't think. Reading, that's a terrible example as Kingfisher. Yeah. It's a rather large one. I think because I could see you, I was like, Reading,
not Reading.
Yeah. Rotherham, for instance. I know there's a club in Rotherham, but it's just another example. Is why is the money being invested in Rotherham when there is no link or participation opportunity? Yeah. Actually, we go along, we'll hit a ball, we tick a box. So
job done.
Yes, but what's the benefit? There's no, like I said, there isn't the progression. Whereas somebody like Brighton, that to me, I've got so many superb examples of what other clubs could be doing, and obviously there's aspects that only work in there that in Brighton because the way Brighton is. But at the same time, they've got so many great learning opportunities and experience that could be used and utilised in other clubs. In terms of actually, they're using those. They've claimed them per se, and they're feeding people in. I know it happened in Sheffield a little bit as well, going back a few years. We've been trying for many, many years, and the council just will not accept sort of that responsibility of having a concrete table. But we've been working we were working to lockdown, and we'd actually got a facility in the town centre to have a ping pong parlour because the town councillors and everybody could see that it was going to feed in. There was a long-term progression or even short-term opportunity.
Can I come back, Liam, on the there's a few great comments, and I'm not seeing them all, but like where does the money come from? Sorry, I forgot who wrote that, but where's the money going to come from for this? While ever we consider ourselves a cap-in-hand sport, we will not succeed. We have to generate income from outside of the sport.
Yeah.
If we look to Sport England, they will fund the things that they want to fund, which might be ping or whatever, parlours or whatever. If that's coming from Sport England, they will have their rules for it, and that might help us some, but it's not our own focus as lovers of table tennis specifically. Mm-hmm. If we look to the membership, we'll get so far, and I agree with some of the comments saying, let's be bold. Roger's saying and others, let's be bold and ask for that money for the international juniors to not have to pay their own expenses from the membership. Just like Tony said, we could do it. But I think with trying to spawn more stronger clubs around the country, the money that's going to help us, we're going to have to get from outside the sport. Let's not look inside and say, we are table tennis, we are deserving, give us money for nothing.
Yeah.
That's not going to get that's a victim mindset. We've got to go out and create the sponsorship in the clubs to fund these things, and we've got to build it ourselves like businesses.
However, so I completely agree. In fact, Colin, so I'll give my contribution, but that was essentially the centre of my point, which was that funding is is being allocated I believe that Table Tennis England are trying their best to allocate funding as efficiently as possible. However, it's not enough to rely on that UK sport funding being however large the percentages of total funding. And actually, we have to look private, and we have to have a huge funnel where that private investment or private sponsorship plays a huge part in our Table Tennis England funding structure looking forward. The only criticism I'd have is it's easier said than done to just say it needs, that needs to happen. But
very difficult.
Table Tennis England in my opinion, going forward, there has to be a mentality shift that is very important, because there's been opportunities such as the ping pong World Championships where, in my opinion anyway, I don't think Table Tennis England have taken full advantage of that outside significant investment. And I know there's been other opportunities, but I just feel like the cooperation between the governing body and private organisations or private investment could be better or tighter.
Easy to throw it back at Table Tennis England, but I'm saying let's not worry about Table Tennis England. Table Tennis England are doing a great job with a small amount of money facilitating table tennis in a number of ways. They are not there to feed us. We are not fledglings that need to be fed. We need to go out and feed ourselves. Table Tennis England needs to provide support, resources and help to enable that to happen.
But I think I still,
not a provider.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing. That's exactly what I was about to say. Table Tennis England they still have a role as a facilitator, so that this private investment isn't alienated, like the World Championships of ping pong is, where it's got nothing. Table Tennis England don't want anything to do with it. And the second thing, in my opinion, the junior question, I think that is a fundamental necessity to have the junior development squad funded by the governing body or by whoever, because I cannot. But the thought that you have to come from a certain background or have to have some sort of money offering back to be part of the England squad is just something that makes me very uncomfortable. So I think when the priorities are set for the future, and there's been a very recent change, because even when I was a junior in 2013, everything was funded, the junior squads. So I think that needs to be a necessity purely because of that age category. And then my last point would be, I do feel we've got a lot of people sort of commenting and it's widely, a lot of people sort of feel alienated by Table Tennis England, saying like they don't listen or nothing's transparent enough. And I think funding, where money's being going, just being completely transparent with the members, I think should also be a strategic priority going forward. And Sandra Deaton did a fantastic piece, an article on what the membership, what members get from their membership. And I think one way that could be communicated better would be like we're doing now, a small video published on YouTube, published on all the social media sites, really take advantage and move with the times, so that we don't have comments saying where's the money going, so that everyone's on the same page, knowing sort of where things are being allocated, what's going on, and then they can sort of have their input of whether it's in the right direction. Does anyone have any other comments? Otherwise, I will go on to the sort of the final question.
I just want to pop in, Liam. And one thing that I've had a lot of discussions with, it ties into what Colin was saying in terms of feeding ourselves, is for me, there's not, and I know I keep bleating on about clubs, but if clubs were to have a similar mentality in terms of tennis clubs and also cricket clubs and rugby clubs that are run as almost independent businesses.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everything should run as a business. We're set up as a charity. There's CIOs, there's kicks, there's loads and loads of different options. But actually having some sort of more business-minded mindset in terms of how clubs are run and structured and offering that support. So I've been,
financial responsibility.
Yeah. We're putting more British League teams in this year, and we're very lucky that we've got. We potentially now got 2 outside sponsorships that are putting in quite a significant amount and doing a lot of support for us.
Well done.
But we've gone looking for that because we know that we're from a highly disadvantaged area. That if we've got players that have as much talent as they have, they won't be able to afford to go and do some of this. But actually, we're providing that opportunity. But by keeping the income in, we can reinvest in our members and our players. By which point, that builds our base pyramid that then brings more money back in. But it's having that structure and that facilitating that opportunity for clubs to develop in terms of that business mindset without just obviously, it's not in any club's interest just to rip their own members off, but having that financial independence and that structure and stability that then will build, hopefully, in terms of that investment, we'll see facilities built.
Yeah,
tangible, visible.
And what you said earlier about what you said earlier about having people having sponsors involved from like sort of a betting background or beer or whatever. I feel like table tennis, you can't, the state the table tennis is in now, you can't really pick and choose as who you want to give you money to build the sport up. If Barry Hearn's there offering to put on a massive event on Sky Sports, even though people are going to be drinking in the crowd, you know, you have to sort of be conscious that it's going to have a long-term positive impact. But yeah,
he won't.
No. yeah.
Not in table tennis.
Mm. But I mean, in that example, he's already had a huge contribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
but just for the viewers that just go, oh, you know, Barry Hearn's done this with ping pong. You know, why don't we get him to do it? And he won't.
No.
There are reasons for that.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess so. The final question, before I sort of open to anyone else that wants to discuss any other issues, is Jason Sugru has sent in a to me prior to the show saying, is it acceptable for the current men's team to discuss selections and give opinions on players that might be entitled for selections? I'm not going to call out specifically because I don't want to sort of personally attack who the players were, but there was a situation a couple of weeks ago on one of these shows where some high-profile men's table tennis players sort of gave their opinion on who should be picked for England or not if they were in charge. Open debate. Do you think that's acceptable or not? Who would like to?
Player power happens in a lot of places all over the place, and I think it's difficult to stop it happening from the point of view you have senior players who are likely to have experience about what's been going on, and so they will have a view. Now, whether that should hold any particular water with the coaches is up to the coaches to be strong enough to say, I've heard what you said, lads, but this is my decision. And that then is, I personally think that's the way it should be, that the coaches make the decision and not the senior players. Hopefully the senior players will develop into coaches one day, and then they'll see how annoying it was when the senior players do that to them when they're coaches.
I've got two answers.
Yeah.
The first one is, on Planet Colin, it wouldn't be acceptable. I do realise we live in a social media world, we live in an individualised world, we live in a world of human rights, to the point of we're free to do things.
Yes.
But as a result, in life we get less freedom from things because people just feel they can do and say what they want. So the world's changed over the last 50 years, and this is one of the symptoms of it. My second answer is, if it's not in their contract and that's not the way that anyone's ever spoken to them, then you can expect that kind of behaviour to possibly happen. If you're running a team, if you're running a squad, then you get really clear as in leadership about the purpose of the team and the squad, its values, its vision, the culture, the strategy, and the leadership style you're going to use. Once those are clear, and the players and squad and other stakeholders would have some input into that. Once that is clear about how we behave, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, then we go with that. So if it's part of the contract, it's okay to say that stuff. Then Jason, it's fine to say that stuff because that was agreed. That was part of the purpose, values, and vision of the organisation. I doubt that it was, but maybe those aspects weren't sufficiently put in place to get a tighter team bond in the first place. But for me, I don't hear Premiership footballers saying, "Oh, I think so and so should be dropped and someone else should be in the team."
Yeah, Matt.
I kind of agree with Colin, to be honest. I mean, I think I've seen what it's being referred to, and I don't believe there's necessarily any malice in it. And it was in a spirit of sort of a chat and their opinion. But at the same time, I don't know if it was necessarily professional, but I don't mean that in a negative, because it wasn't. At the same time, they're representing themselves, representing the table tennis England or table tennis. You know what I mean?
It's a tricky one.
But yeah, for me, it's a weird one. I don't know if I was necessarily comfortable, but I wasn't uncomfortable at the same time. So I'm sure it's Basterfield that says I'm going to have splinters in my arse for this one.
No, I know it is a very tricky one. I think if you look outside in and look at football, I think you don't. Yeah, you're right. You don't see Premier League footballers or England footballers sort of commenting on who should be or who shouldn't be out. However, so therefore it's probably slightly sort of unprofessional. However, the important perspective I would come at it is that I 100% agree with the England men's team and people that have been in the sport and contributed a lot to be talking about these issues, whether that's selection or membership or the system. Probably not. The way I come at it, though, is that they probably shouldn't be talking about that on social media platforms, but they should definitely be talking about that within the governing body to help improve and move that forward. If there is a taboo, within the sport where you get penalised for giving your honest observation as to whether something's working or not within the organisation, then that needs to be eradicated, because the amount that can be gained from sort of private discussions or consultations. If you look at the top companies in the world, Google, Facebook, whatever, they promote their employees to sort of flag issues and say what's bad with the company so that they can take it forward and move to it. They don't necessarily expect those employees to go on social media and publicly, highlight all that, but they do definitely breed a culture of it's okay to say that we're doing something wrong. We can identify, we can learn, and we can move it forward. And that I would 100% promote. So, yeah, that's where I stand on that.
Vote Liam.
Yeah.
Liam, I agree with that. But your key word there, Liam, for me was within.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, you do want to be. I mean, Henry's saying we ask people to be open and honest, and then complain when they do that. For me, it's the question of where that boundary lies. How much of your dirty linen do you hang out in public?
Yeah.
But I completely agree that within the construct, then it's absolute total accountability, and it's people should be open, honest, because it's all about the team performing according to the values of the organisation.
I think we'll probably leave it there. Feel free to comment when this goes out on YouTube or Facebook or any other social media channels. We can continue the discussion online. But thank you very, very much for everyone that's watched, and especially for the panel for your time and coming and sharing your ideas and discussions.